Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Dr. Shane Wood, where we're talking about a whole lot of stuff. If you haven't seen the first part, please go back and watch it because this conversation goes all over the place, from emotionally healthy spirituality to prophetic and apocalyptic literature to the Superbowl halftime show. And so you don't want to miss any part of this. But if you are caught up, without further ado, here's the rest of our interview.
I had somebody recently ask me, like, if you were going to teach a course on the entire Bible, what is the one thread that you would pull from Genesis all the way to Revelation?
Oh, that's a good thought.
Without even blinking, I was like, God's pursuit. It is absurd how much he relentlessly pursues at every step of the journey. And Revelation's no different. And I think if we allow the book of Revelation to really, in a sense, grab a hold of that message, it's been coming since Genesis, we realize that God's pursuit is unending. And he will even fight us for us. And that, to me, is one of the key things that Revelation does. Revelation comforts and confronts based on what it is that you as a Christian need. And the thing that's fascinating is, and God knows you better than you know yourself. So I guess what I would say is to the Christian is really work hard to stop running and allow, instead of God chasing you, turn and allow him to embrace you, which will be terrifying.
Absolutely.
I mean, I share a lot of my own journal in the book, but I even talk a lot about Mother Teresa's journey. It was very different than what we thought.
Yeah.
Her book, which I bring up, I believe it's called I can't remember the name of it, but it's in Thinning the Veil. But it talks about how it's like 27 years she didn't hear a single word from the Lord, and she just talked about it. She talked about it as her inner darkness. And so she's serving in Calcutta in this saint-like way, and she literally cannot hear anything the Lord is saying to her. And that type of experience as a human is actually very normal, but we almost, in a sense, read the Bible and look at these saints and look at pastors, and we forget that what it means to be human is universal. Yeah. Christ experienced loneliness, and so will you. But instead of running from those moments, turn your face towards the God that is relentlessly trying to thin the veil. Because he's desperately in pursuit of becoming one with you. He wants to embrace you.
And you would hope that everybody that would be what they would think of when they think of the revelation.
Absolutely.
Like, that's the revelation, that God's near and that he's been pursuing the whole book. I love that you've been so open and vulnerable. I think you connect so well with people through weakness, way more than strength. And I also think that this idea of being honest with God, I say it from stage a lot at our church, but God is not, it's really hard to be loved and found in a fake place. So if you're going to fake love and fake where you are, love can't get you there. It can't find you there. Yep. But if you're going to be willing to be real, love will always find you in that real, because that's where it's been the whole time. That's where it's been the whole time.
That is a killer line.
So,
that's awesome. Yeah.
That's the biggest thing I took away from the gift of being yourself. It's like, you can never experience God's love if you're not there.
That's right.
If it's your false self there, your false self, that's not you. Like, so I don't know. I don't know how to say that any better.
No, and like, that's true. And 2 years ago, 2022, I lost a bunch of weight, but it was Psalm 13 was like the psalm that I just quoted over and over again. How long, oh God, will you allow all this stuff? But the very end is, but I know you are faithful,
right? And
I will trust in your never failing love, And it's so, as much as the anger is, you can see David laying it all out, as angry as he possibly. And anger was not an emotion that was something I wanted to mimic because of the home I grew up in. So I wasn't wanting to mimic because I saw it as not a healthy thing. But ultimately, what it ended up being was, no, that's where I really was. And that's where God wanted to meet me. Yeah. And if I wasn't going to be honest about anger, then I wasn't going to allow God to meet me there. Yep. And God wants to deal with your anger as much as any lust, any gluttony, as any issue in your life. Anger is something that he's not afraid of. And he's excited, I think, in some ways for you to go, trust me with this.
100%. Because if you're angry, it's like, now we can get somewhere.
Yes.
But if you're numb, there's nowhere we can go.
Yeah, it's I don't know if the gift of being yourself said this or if I was just thinking it, but the like hiding your false self every time he talked about that, I just had the image of Adam and Eve covering themselves up.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, God can see you. He's not omniscient because you put some leaves on that he made onto you, which he made. But like, you're not bringing yourself to God. Yeah. Who's he meeting?
But here's what I love about what like that image you just brought up. But think about how tender he is in his response to them, though.
Yeah,
they cover themselves up with it, with fig leaves, which is ridiculous. Yeah. But then before he sends them out of the garden, he goes, "That clothing's not going to do. Let me clothe you with garments of skin that will actually endure." Yeah. He incorporates our ridiculousness into his redemption, and I find that to be unreal, so tender, and what Revelation is all about. Yeah. Allowing our ridiculousness to be a part of his redemption story.
It's the thing we talk a lot about, and I love that you brought that up because it's one of the things I say, that if you do not think God is accommodating, you do not know our God. Yeah. He will never remove the ideal.
No.
But he always accommodates in love. And so the first time an animal is killed, it's God accommodating man, even though it's not his ideal. And so to watch him do that early on in the text is wild.
It is wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
But I've been reading through Genesis again. I'm at chapter 36. And the amount of times I'm like, he did what? Even the tracing the theme of God changing his mind. Yeah. So like in Jonah, him relenting from sending calamity at the like 19th quotation of the Exodus 34 is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. But even that far, where he's like, was it Genesis 22-ish maybe? Sodom and Gomorrah and Abraham, like they're even 50 people. Yeah. If I may be so presumptuous, 45 people. And God just like, yeah, sure. Yeah. But the amount of times he comes back and God isn't like, I said it the first time, I can't lie. 50. That's my last offer. He's like bartering, haggling.
But that's where I would even describe that as a part of his pursuit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where a couple years, I've not been going to counseling for like 2 years, but I had like a 2.5 year stint where I was really dealing with some stuff. And my counselor asked me at the end, based off of the story of Hagar, where she, in a really tender moment, is running away from being abused and mistreated by Sarai and Abram. And God meets her at the well, and the angel of the Lord. And he basically tells her, go back to your place of pain. I want you to go back. And then before she leaves, she gives a name of God. She says, you are the God who sees me. And my counselor said, if you were going to give a name of God based on your story, Shane, if you would give a name to God, what would it be? And for 2 years, I didn't have an answer. And so it's only been like 6 months. And I texted it to my counselor a little bit ago. I said, I got it now. And he was like, what is it? And I said, he is the God who is more tender with me than I am with myself. Because the amount of ways that I keep myself in the same cycle of brokenness, or I keep running away from God. He's always like, it's okay, you can run that way, but when you get tired, then go ahead and sit down. I'll find you, and then we'll go back home. You don't have to do it this way, but when you do, I'm not going to berate you. I'm just going to pursue you. Yeah. And I find that to be, frankly, the very heartbeat of Revelation. It is not pretending that we have experienced or are in rebellion. Revelation's very clear, like, absolutely you are. But even in that, I'm not going to stop pursuing you.
Yeah. These connections between John are blowing my mind as you're talking about this. I could talk about this for days, but the idea that John's the one that writes, he comes with the full measure of grace and truth, just clicks so hard with what you're saying Revelation is. Yeah. It doesn't hide the truth in any measure, but it doesn't hide the pursuit of God in any measure either. Right. And the grace that he's willing to pursue us. That alone in my like gut, when those types of books, like this type of book then is folded into the Gospels in a way that it's not seen as something that extends our understanding of God, but deepens our understanding of God, I think is the healthiest way to view it. At least that's what I'm taking away from this is like, don't be scared of Revelation unless you're scared to meet a deeper version of Jesus.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Because that's awesome.
We have so little time left. Sure. I wish we had like a whole other hour left. There's one thing, because of what day it is and what series we're in and where our church is at, that I wanted to make sure to ask you. which is so we're in a series on the Bible. Super easy. Anyway, just kidding.
No sleep lost here.
We're in a series on the Bible, and like as general as possible, because there are people at our church and maybe people who are listening to this who grew up with it as the handbook for how to live, and grew up with it as a list of instructions. I mean, if you did most of the chapters in Genesis, you're under arrest. But like, so like all these different things and a misunderstanding of it. And then also, this is God's holy word. He's trying to talk to me, open up to Haggai and whatever.
Yeah.
How like no understanding of genre, no whatever. Like, this is what God's trying to tell me today, and it's Song of Songs, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
I like this one.
Whoops.
Whoops is right. So we just did week 2, and we quickly went over like what's between the covers. Some like, here are like 8 or 9 semi-rough genres and or sections, sort of loose. But talking about a little bit of the overall story last week. But one thing I wanted to make sure we covered a tiny bit, because you could probably help us a lot, is how can somebody open the Bible? What's like an easy instruction or a couple instructions or idea to help them open the Bible when they get to prophecy or apocalypse?
Yeah.
What's a beginner steps to like walk through that in any sort of helpful way?
Absolutely. Yeah. So a couple of things I would say. First of all, throughout the whole thing, you have to remember it's written by a real person to real people going through real things. If you can keep that in your mind and constantly be asking, how is this addressing real issues these real people were going through? Like one of the worst things you can do is to hijack anyone's conversation and make it about you. But this is a conversation from a pastor to his people that are going through real issues he's trying to help them navigate. Step 2 is, if it's prophetic, then it's a little bit more dicey. And what I mean by that is prophets only arose to prosecute or persuade a rebellious people. So the moment that Revelation chapter 1 verse 3 says, "Blessed is the words the blessed are is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy," the people in the pews go, "Oh shoot, this is about to get real."
Supposed to be gone today.
That's when the cameras come out at the intervention.
Exactly.
Like,
so a prophecy is always expecting a response from the reader. Like it is always calling them from a place to a place when it comes to their life. That's the only time prophets came up in the Old Testament. Same with the New. Like even just look at John the Baptist, the quintessential prophet. What does he do? He comes, first words he says, repent. Like that's what prophets do. But when it comes to the way in which it is spoken, the first thing I always remember, especially with Revelation, is it may be foreign to me, but it was not foreign to them. There are other apocalypses in the Bible, like a ton of Daniel chapter 7 verses 12 or chapter 12, chapter 7 through 12 is present in Revelation. Why? Because this is how they communicated, especially for a people that's in a space of oppression. So they're underneath the regime of Rome. At the end of Domitian's reign, who's the emperor reigning whenever Revelation's written from 90 to 96. He's losing it, and everyone's a target. Not just Christians, everyone's a target. And as a result, the volatility, the fear that's pervading their like apocalyptic and prophetic books are usually written either right before exile or in the middle of what experience is like of an exile.
An exile, for people who haven't thought about it that much, you lost.
Yeah,
it's America. The U.S. has never really experienced this. In a like your country lost, you have to, and this is sort of the thing that happened in World War I to World War II. World War I, the Germans and some other countries lost.
Yeah. But
part of the thing that led to World War II is how crushed they were by having to pay reparations to the other countries who were also crushed.
Yeah. To understand it in modern days, it would be more learning how to put on the flesh of an indigenous person, a Native American. That's closer to the context.
That's like exile.
Well, they're even living on the same land, and it's no longer called their land.
Yep.
That's closer to what the Christians are experiencing in Rome.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Do you think that as you're helping someone start this, just changing a little bit of an understanding of what they're going to read in an apocalyptic or a prophetic book is, rather than thinking about what it's going to predict in events, it's actually more of what it's going to predict happening in your heart or in the hearts of the people that are rebellious
Correct.
to God.
Which and that's what and that's why symbolism is so huge in it, because anytime that you're dealing with the things of the inner world, you're always going to be stretching in languages of poetry.
Yes.
So language is stretched to the breaking point when I talk about how much I love my wife.
Yeah.
I would never just say, yeah, we have a contract that witnesses were there for. The more sterile I describe my love with my wife, the more ridiculous it is.
Absolutely.
Same thing with apocalyptic. The more intense the situation they're experiencing in their own rebellion or in their own, frankly, resilience in a time of oppression, the more that it's going to sound like poetry.
Yeah.
I mean, think of the Psalms. I mean, those are visceral.
Yep.
What David is going through whenever, he's his child is dying, after the sin of Bathsheba comes out.
And he even says,
Always.
surely I was sinful in my mother's womb.
Even in my
while
mother's womb. Right.
While he has a child conceived in sin.
Yeah. Or like, what is it? I think it's Psalm 86 or one of those, it's like, at the very end, it's like, in darkness is my closest companion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's describing something that is both outlandish and real. Like, if you've been in that space, you know it. That's the playground of apocalypses. They are taking the imagery and they're drawing out that inner world in a very real way, which I would describe it as they're actually thinning that world that we think is just internal, but actually what we do here internally and physically is directly connected to what's happening in the cosmos, in heaven, and frankly, even in the machinations of Satan.
And I know that we're leaning into with our series this idea that the Holy Spirit plays such a crucial role that's been left out of the understanding of the Bible. It's not even invited into the conversation. We keep it so scientific.
That's too subjective. He's gonna say something wrong.
Like we keep it so like I got to prove it. I got to know the context, and that's one of the things. Like I love Ozark to death, but that was something the Christian church just sometimes didn't know how to lean into the mystery of God being larger than science.
That's exactly right.
And so I do think as much as we can study, keep this in context, know the verse, like learn the illustrations, there's a crucial role to implementation that takes the relationship that you have with God into account. And if you are leaving that at the door, I believe you are leaving out what God actually may even want to specifically say to you.
Absolutely right.
Okay.
And if you take that approach to revelation, then frankly, at a certain point, prediction seems to be woefully short of what you really could get out of it.
Oh my gosh. That, I hope, if you're still listening and you heard that's worth the whole podcast.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's worth the whole podcast. Well, Shane, really appreciate you being on. Thank you. Hopefully we'll get to have you on again at some point.
In about 4 years.
We'll
150 episodes.
We'll get to talk about how this halftime show was so cool.
Oh yeah,
and all of the and how amazing the symbolism was in it, and it felt so. You want to talk about apocalyptic or prophetic?
Yeah.
So many people missed what happened in that, and I know we had a great conversation before we started. That man, I've never felt like my audience has no clue what we're talking about.
Trevor, here's my question: what's more timely, us talking about prophetic and apocalyptic for the week right after we talk about genres, or us talking about the Super Bowl halftime show for the week after the Super Bowl halftime show?
I could not believe what I was watching yesterday, thinking about the conversation we were supposed to have tomorrow, and I was just like, no one's going to understand what's happening right now.
Right.
Yeah.
But if that's a great example of how to even deal with apocalypses.
Yeah.
But if you can put on the flesh of the first century, like in the churches, and you see it's real people, you would not believe what Revelation is saying to you, and it has very little to do with the future. But the halftime show of the Super Bowl was exactly the amount of statements that were being said that people overlooked because they weren't a part of the conversation was absurd. So you can walk away from a halftime show or Revelation and go, "Yeah, that was cool."
Yeah.
Or you can walk away and go, "I don't know that I'm going to be the same again."
Yeah.
Do you have another 5-10 minutes?
Sure.
To talk about it?
here's
this is going to be a 2-part episode, and this is going to be part 2.
So here's the part about the halftime show that felt too real when I was watching it. It felt too real because right now we are dealing with one of the greatest divides of what is truth and who gets to declare it.
Yeah.
And how they get to declare it.
Yeah.
And it's divided across aisles, it's divided across ethnic groups, it's divided across racial groups. And what always saves, which we had this very conversation in this room, what always brings back people's focus is true art.
That's right.
It's true expression, real expression. Right. And as weird as this is going to sound to the Midwest mind that has grown up here, that halftime performance was one of the clearest expressions of art. I may not agree with it or completely like take it in as what.
Yeah.
It was pure art.
Yeah.
Pure art.
Now, that's coming from you who knew the backstory. I saw it sitting with a family from our church at volume 12 out of 100. Just like, so I couldn't hear what he was saying out of sheer volume level.
Yeah.
Just like, nah, he's getting it. He's moving around.
And yet
Game over. That's what I saw.
But let's just even say at volume 12.
Yeah.
The imagery though was strikingly different than what you could see than what previous halftime shows.
Yeah. The things that I noticed were different, and that the family we were with watching it noticed were different. Were like, as silly as this may be, there's a lot more clothing. There are less people with less clothing
Because that would have actually cheapened the message.
Yeah.
It would have distracted from what the message that Kendrick Lamar was trying to get across. And that, to me, was a part of the brilliance of it.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talked about before, most other halftime shows, you'll have 20 artists.
Yeah.
He did have SZA come out, but he was the narrator throughout the entire...
Him and Samuel.
Yeah, and even Samuel L. Jackson's cameos.
He was the narrator officially, but he was like a character. His narrator was the character.
But even the fact that it was Uncle Samuel L. Jackson, which was a brilliant twist in multiple different directions. What I loved about it was, and going back to art, this is one of the reasons why whenever communist Russia took over, one of the first things they did was they destroyed and attacked artists.
Yep.
I mean, it's also one of the fascinating things I found. But the Velvet Revolution in Prague, Czech Republic, when it happened in 1990, which actually was a nonviolent revolution where 4 million people packed into the square, and the tank had to decide: do I crush them all, or does the communist regime fall? Well, why it fell and who became the new president? A playwright. Václav Havel was the very first, and his plays, he was a fugitive because his plays actually had these subversive messages, beautifully well written, but actually talked about the folly of communism.
Wow.
And the people loved it so much, but then if you didn't know he was speaking the people's language, then for a while his plays went on unchecked. And then once the powers realized what he was saying,
it's too late.
Then it's too late. They're quoting it, and he's a fugitive, but he becomes their first president. It's always interesting to me what happens whenever a society forgets that the artist in their community is their soul.
Yeah.
It's the prophetic soul that calls them back to who they are. Regardless of whether or not you agree with the message, that's what art always has done, which is why it's always a threat. And it's also why Revelation is most understood by artists.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was what I kept thinking, was I was in a room with a bunch of people that had no idea the backstory, no idea what was occurring. And they're watching it and they're looking at me because I'm the only one that knows what's happening. And I'm trying to help them understand, but it's almost too much, too quickly. And then
every line.
And then they don't like it.
Yeah.
They don't like what's being communicated. And I'm not saying they're like angry against it. They're just kind of like, what does that matter? And in my mind, I'm going like, you're taking, what has been a very, I would say, racially charged decade so far.
Yeah.
And you're allowing an artist up there who's been a faithful man to what we know, to one woman for the last 15 years and has taken his career very seriously. But what I said in the hallway right before we started this is people don't understand the amount of money you can make off being the halftime show.
Yeah.
He just won 5 Grammys. He could have just taken a victory lap, showed off his skills, walked out of there and made buku money.
Yeah.
But he set that opportunity aside for something that he believed deeper in. The song that's at the center of all this, it's now the most award-winning Grammy
Get ready
of
for
all
the
time.
backstory. If you didn't like it because you didn't know what was going on, he thought he was just showing off his 5 best songs and they weren't that good. You need to listen.
So it's called Not Like Us, and it's a direct... It's from an old school rap feud, which I love, is so cool, with another artist named Drake. And Drake obviously is a lot more popular at the beginning of this, but obviously is losing. Well, of course, Kendrick gets to the point where he's basically pointing out that Drake is a false rapper, not in the sense of like he can't rhyme, but he's declaring himself to be something that he's not. And Kendrick's going, I grew up in Compton. I raised out of the ashes, have stayed faithful to one woman, and actually created a career. And I'm doing this all on my own. Yeah. And Drake, raised in Canada, healthcare, good parents, didn't, I'm not saying it's easy to become what he is, but
Absolutely.
also had the advantage of the music industry having more playable music. And so they just got behind him and elevated him. And he's trying to act like he's the same as everyone else.
Yeah.
So when he releases this song, Not Like Us, it's basically calling out Drake to say, you're not who you're saying you are, which is a powerful message in and of its own.
It's really thinning the veil, if you might say.
I mean, truthfully.
Now, here's
coming out May 20th.
Here's what nobody understands about the halftime show. Kendrick is so smart that he takes the rocket fuel that is this song and this idea about the most popular artist at a point not too long ago, and he attaches it to a political idea that he believes very hard in, and he attaches it in the most beautiful way of saying, you don't realize that the government and the quote unquote man that's in charge of what you see and hear right now and you think they are not for you.
Yeah.
They're not like us. They're different. And
Yeah, he had the refrain, turn off the TV.
yes.
Yep. And then it ends with the game over on
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you said, and again, for me, I want to separate this. It's inconsequential of whether or not you agree with it or not. But this is how symbolism works at its peak.
Absolutely.
It's how it works at its best. Because what it ultimately does is you can actually admire what you see and if you want to, be convicted by what you see at the exact same time. But if you can also look at it, say, that's pretty, and walk away, and the artist themselves is actually content.
Yep.
Because, and truthfully, that is what Revelation is doing. I don't think Revelation is really all that concerned about whether or not every single person knows every single symbol. And that's what I tell my students all the time. Do not miss the forest for one tree.
Yeah.
Don't get obsessed with one symbol and miss the whole message. But what Revelation is doing is it's saying, I am bearing witness, and you can either respond to it and even your lack of response is a response.
Yep.
But that's absolutely. It was what I would call, and I don't use either of these words negative. It was enacted propaganda.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So just to connect why I would 1,000% agree. Kendrick starts the show on a Mustang, steps off a Mustang, and then the dancers create the American flag, and they are continually making the flag wave, but it's all black men.
Yep.
And then he talks through a song that talks about the building of a nation and the building of a community or the rap culture.
Right.
And then he steps into all these controversies. Serena Williams was penalized for doing a crib walk at one of a professional tennis events.
I think at Wimbledon or something.
So guess what? He's like, sure, put it in there. So not only is it against the tennis, but it's also happens to be Drake's ex-girlfriend.
Right.
So it's a double entendre of a touch, which was like
what is happening right now?
The girl, I forget her name, Scissor. Is that right?
SZA.
So
SZA.
she was seen as dating Drake when she was 17.
Yeah.
And everybody had controversy around it. So he brings her up and shows off her beautiful voice.
Yeah.
But all she's been known for is this sexual and he redeems her in some way and shows her beauty, that she's not just some random name that's been taught through the tabloids, but she's a beauty. And then at the very end goes hard at the man.
Which part of the man was you were telling me is the government and the way he's tying it into Not Like Us. But also part of it was that song that he dropped, Not Like Us. Drake is trying to sue him and the big distributors and whatever to get them to not play it. And he has a whole very tongue-in-cheek looking at the camera moment of should I play it? I'm getting sued. Will ya? Whatever. Back and forth, whatever. The whole time.
And then
he's wearing
probably
the Amazon A.
One
of the music
A minor.
Suing. And then that lyric. The stage lights up with the 4 buttons on a Sony PlayStation controller. Sony's one of the music groups who's trying to get him not to play it. And he's like, I'll just play this in front of everyone.
And probably the thing that everybody knew was happening, but maybe you didn't realize was happening, is having Samuel L. Jackson play both Uncle Sam and Uncle Tom at the same time is, I think, one of the most, I was like, when he came up, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going, I actually am more shocked that there was not been more like people that are like bringing this up.
But here's why. listen to everything you had to explain in order for them to understand the conversation of the community.
Yep.
And at that point, that is, frankly, they're like full circle. That's what the problem is at the distance between us and Revelation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
is we
true.
don't even know the conversations. We don't. And that's why I said, when you asked me what are, based off the genre, what are some of the key things I would say? First thing I said was, these are real people at a real time going through real issues. And if you do not enflesh them, you will not hear them.
No.
It's not possible.
No.
And that's kind of the irony of really the whole conversation is if you do not enflesh the community, then you can literally engage them like static in the background of the things that matter to you, your own agendas. Same thing with Revelation. So I'm going to predict it. Well, but if that was the love letter written to me and you were using it to predict, I would be devastated.
Yeah.
Because that is not what that letter was to me as a church, as a Christian in the first century.
Yeah.
It was the thing that actually turned my family around. It was the thing that actually reintroduced me to Jesus. It was the thing that actually led to my martyrdom. And you're going to hijack it for what?
Yeah.
So it's this beautiful, what I would say in interpretation, interpretation is one of the most beautiful opportunities to practice empathy.
Yeah.
The emptying of myself and the receiving of another in order to experience the world through their flesh.
Yeah.
And that's what Christ did in Philippians 2.
I love that. And I feel the intensity of that in like a real way, because I feel like what ultimately I want to do with Revelation is turn it into a national treasure and just go looking for like this like
under the
thing
church on Wall
at the
Street.
end, you know what I mean?
With 2 E's or whatever.
Rather than seeing it like the 16th chapel.
Yeah. No, that's right.
Right? And like rather than recognizing this is a person that drew this and made this.
And that was highly politically charged.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like even images of certain popes and cardinals he didn't like that were like being tortured in hell. Like that was highly political in the Vatican, commissioned by the Pope. Like, I mean, Michelangelo was no joke.
And so, and that's
was the 16th century, whatever, Kendrick Lamar. That's way too late.
Well, I think that helps, me recognize when I'm sitting in a room where all I was hearing was, I can never understand rap.
Sure. But
like all I can, I'm like, why is he doing this?
But here's the thing. Also, so there's a book called the Acts of John, 2nd century book that is not canon. The church, but there's a fascinating tale in it where so this is such a John moment. So he's in Ephesus, where church tradition says that's where he dies, and they're having one of these pagan festivals where they're all offering sacrifices outside of their homes, and you're supposed to come to this parade wearing all white, victory, and as the image is passing by, you offer the sacrifice, and everybody is out, and they're all parading, they're all celebrating, and John walks to one of the most prominent places of the parade wearing all black. And in that moment, he sets out, and that would say 2 things. Number one, it would say, A, I am rejecting your victory, but B, I'm also marked by death. Your target can be me. And it's this powerful enacted moment of, and this is what, frankly, is the legacy of Christians.
Yeah.
And I find this to be one of the things, it's kind of like the way that I think of tithing. Tithing to me is enacted protest for what the world values.
Yeah.
I give this not because of what I get. I give this because I refuse to be controlled by it.
Absolutely.
And we need to regain some of these rituals inside of our churches, because I think these rituals are typically connected to our identity. And I don't know a lot of the times if we know who we are anymore.
Absolutely.
But we are looking for who we are, which is why we cling to things like politics and cling to things like sports. And we're trying to find the answer of what identity can I be, wear their story, wear their uniform, and find meaning.
Yep.
And the answer is Christ gave that to all of us if we could just see him clearly.
This is a tribe. Where's my tribe? And I think that's ultimately why he calls us the body of Christ, or at least Paul does in Corinthians, because he's trying to attach you that you have purpose and meaning here, and there's actually an identity in you that's like no one else. Yeah. And that's that whole point, right? I love the concept of tithing. We talk about every November at our church pretty intensely, and we talk about, you want to get out of greed, the only way to do it is be gracious and gratitude and giving. That's just the only way to know for sure that you're not being greedy.
Same way with anger. The only way to get out of anger is to give grace.
Yep. So
Forgive.
it's a weird thing, but like
Pray
the
for those who
antithesis,
persecute you.
right? Like the opposite of fear is faith. Like
That's right.
like you there's only one or two ways out of it. So, well, now that we've done the full journey, I think
That's
we've
what I
covered
came here
everything.
for.
Jeremiah, have we not covered? Is there anything we haven't covered yet? I mean, we need to make sure that we like. Favorite food. There we go.
Okay. I have a great final question.
Oh, no.
This is gonna put Shane really in a bind.
That was fun.
So
can
Shane,
We've worn him down now, so
can
he's
dodge
ready
it.
to
You are-
kill shot.
Dr. Shane J stands for Jehovah Wood.
No, that's not true.
That's not true. You are Ozark Christian College professor of New Testament and its origins. You have your PhD in the Book of Revelation and ancient Roman histories. I don't know, whatever
I'm waiting
that
for
is.
the question.
And
We're getting there.
and on top of that, you were a worship leader at a church for some amount of time.
Uh-huh.
One of the most famous passages from Revelation and most easily recognizable is the throne room scene in chapter 4, Holy, Holy, Holy. What is, in your opinion, the best and the worst Christian worship song that uses Holy, Holy, Holy? in it?
I'm not doing that. That's way too politically charged.
Hey, cut
And scene.
cut it. Pull the plug. We can talk about Kendrick, but not that.
When Shane does the Super Bowl next year,
You start messing with
we'll
Maverick
find out.
City, we're in trouble.
By Carrie Joby.
Amy Lee Riddle actually hates her own song. Right?
Really
No kidding.
hates the lady who wrote Revelation song.
He did not want to talk about Revelation.
Interesting.
Wow.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was a.
It's a great way to.
That's a good
I was
nugget.
gonna say. So
Is it ND Mixolydian?
It starts on a 5. That's all I can tell you.
Starts out of
Yeah.
oh my gosh. Well, it's been a journey. I appreciate you, Shane, for your time. You even gave us a little extra.
Yeah.
And thank you for that. As we're kind of moving forward, I hope that we can continue the relationship and let you know as we're stepping into, I think people think there's tons of controversy in Revelation. I think more than anything, clarity is what we're trying to declare. And so I think we brought some clarity today. But that does not negate the level of Holy Spirit conversation, study, learning from how and why the person that's written it, like being ready to actually step in and not just discover some mystery verse that now some sort of clarity has been declared. Sounds like the full breadth of the conversation needs to be heard before you can take it. The thing I'll tell you is if you've enjoyed this conversation and it's been something that you're excited, Shane has an incredible set of resources for the Book of Revelation through Ozark Christian
I think
College.
they just released their second part, right?
Yeah.
Y'all.
Yeah. And
not
actually,
they only.
So at the end of Thinning the Veil, each chapter, there's something called Going Deeper.
Yeah.
And there's actually, so there's 3 sections, the tool, a text, and the takeaway. And the tool and the text both have videos that go with it. And then the takeaway is a spiritual discipline.
Are the videos like you talking, or are they like watch this random thing that applies to it?
No, they would be me, explaining,
great.
the tool or explaining the text. And
They're
Great.
powerful tools. And I remember watching one of the first ones and you explained 666. And I was like, oh, so I've just been wrong my whole life. Like,
Yep.
I was just like, I've been wrong my whole life. And so I legitimately, they're really cool tools, free things that Ozark Christian offers, and a beautiful display of the things that you've learned and grown in, and would be extensions of this conversation if you'd like to go and learn nuance.
If you want to find those, they're all on YouTube, I'm pretty sure, but also they're on occ.edu/next level. Also, Shane has a website, which is
ShaneJwood.com.
and I'm sure even more stuff is on there. You have entire like audio of college classes.
Yeah, hundreds of hours of
I want to say
lectures for
episodes,
free.
but they're classes.
Yeah, they're lectures.
Like, they're days.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you can
tons of
go
great stuff.
deep down the rabbit hole
That's right.
if you want to go into Shane's brain and mind, which
You may never come out.
God help us all.
Well, as always, if you want to see more, you can click on other videos that are around this, or as always, like and subscribe. It always helps our YouTube channel and the algorithm, or leave a review anywhere you're listening to this on a podcast app.
Will Solak leave a comment? And
Thanks, Mom.
I'm probably going to link, hopefully if you're watching this, I'm going to link the episode, whatever, with Shane like
Between Two
4
Trees.
years ago. Yeah,
That'd be
the
awesome.
Between Two Trees interview
Awesome.
below this. So
Well, as
Thanks,
always, have a great and glorious day in the Lord. We'll see you guys later.
see ya.